Hi everyone, welcome to today's webinar, Tips to Work Faster in ColorCert. Presenting today is Bob Binder, a Solutions Architect at X-Rite Pantone. I'm Robert Grotans, the Global Digital Learning Manager, and I'll be moderating today's webinar. Just a few things to go over before we get started. Due to the number of people that are attending today's webinar, we will keep everyone muted. If you have any question during today's presentation, please feel free to use the questions function on the GoToWebinar panel, and we will have some time at the very end of today's webinar to answer a few of your questions. Finally, this webinar will be recorded, and we will follow up with an email after this webinar with a link to the recording so that you can watch it again. I will turn it over to Bob to kick things off.
Thanks, Robert. And welcome everyone to today's webinar. As Robert said, my name is Bob Binder. I'm a solution architect with X-Rite. And today what I'd like to share with you are some recent improvements we've made to our ColorCert software. As you already know, ColorCert is sold as a SaaS model. And the big advantage of that is that we're able to make updates on a continuous basis, and those updates become available to you as soon as we've developed them. And this is a big advantage over the older model of developing software where we come out with a major update every 12 or 18 months. This allows you to get frequent updates. And I want to share with you today an update that we've made recently that I think is very beneficial to you. And so when we launch the ColorCert software, it opens up to what we refer to as the chooser screen, because we can choose which workflow we want to use from here. Some people may refer to this as a splash screen, but regardless of how you refer to this, we've added a lot of information that's available to you in this status section at the bottom of our chooser screen. And this is what I want to walk through today. And this is going to make your usage of ColorCert much more efficient. So I'm going to step through the information that's here. And the first piece of information here, now this has existed for a while, but we've expanded upon it. If you've used ColorCert in the past, you're probably familiar that when you do connect, we show you the model of instrument that you're connected to. And we've always had in the past either a red or green indicator, which tells us that we're either connected to the device or for some reason we're not connected to the device. That part of the status screen has existed for some time. Everything else here is new. And part of what is new is we're able to show you more information about the device than just the model name. You can see here that this is also showing me the aperture size. In my case, my instrument has a 2mm aperture, and it also shows me the setting of our mode switch. Those folks that use an X-Rite Exact, you're going to be familiar with the fact that there is a switch by the aperture that allows us to choose either M0, M2, M3 mode, or it allows us to choose M1 mode. And so this just provides the operator validation of the switch setting. There's one more new feature that we have here when we're connected to a spherical device like our CI64, and I'll show you that in just a moment. If we look to the right of the setting where we're at right here, we provide information about NetProfiler. And for those of you that use NetProfiler, this information here might in fact be the most important upgrade here. NetProfiler, as you're probably aware, is a separate software utility that we can use with X-Rite devices to validate that the instrument is performing correctly. And in the event that the instrument may have drifted a little bit, it's able to build a profile for the device, which we can use to pull it back to readings that are closer to a reading fresh out of the factory. This provides us actually with 3 bits of information about NetProfiler. The first thing that it verifies for us is that NetProfiler is actually enabled on the device. It's possible to turn that off on the device. So this tells us here that NetProfiler is activated. The next thing that it confirms for us is that we do have a valid profile on the device. And then the third thing that it shows us is if I do have a valid profile, it shows me the expiration date. Okay, and you can see that that is September 26th. Now, those of you that are viewing this webinar live, you're probably aware that today's date is October 14th. I took this screen grab a couple of weeks ago so that I could show you what this looks like when the profile is in a valid state, so that I could also show you a connection to the same instrument today, and you can see what it looks like once the profile is expired. The other thing I would like to show you right here before I do that is that you'll notice the NetProfiler icon here, and that icon is gray. When the icon is gray, that tells you that everything is set to go. So you really don't need to look at all those other bits of information. If the icon is gray, you know that NetProfiler is activated, you know that you've got a valid profile, and you know that the profile has not yet expired. If I connect to this instrument today, my profile is now expired. You can see that the date's still the same, September 26th. However, that's in the past now. So it tells me that NetProfiler is activated, but now my profile is expired. And you can see that the NetProfiler icon has now turned red. So if I launch my ColorCert software, I see the NetProfiler information here. My icon is red. I know that I need to grab my NetProfiler kit and build a new profile before I proceed. You might be using NetProfiler for yourself, in which case you want to do this so that you know you're getting the most accurate readings. Or there are some brands that require NetProfiler, and in that case, you definitely want to do this so that you're not getting flagged by the brand for using an unprofiled device. If I move back over to the left-hand side of the screen, you can see there's 3 more pieces of information below the instrument information. And this section of the status screen is showing us connections to outside servers or databases. And so let me just show you what we have here. The first piece of information tells us if we're connected to a repository server. For those of you that are using ColorCert proper, you know that we have the ability to connect to various repository servers. If you're a converter, you might have your own repository server. If you are printing for brands, you may be connected to 1 or more brand servers. And so by including this, what this does is this very quickly gives the operator feedback that yes, they are connected to a repository server. And if they are, it shows them what server they're connected to. You can see that today I am actually connected to an X-Rite server. So this is a server that we use for demos and testing in various functions. If I was connected to a brand server, it would show me that as well. This is very useful because before we showed you this information, you actually had to go into the preferences to see if you were connected. So this helps speed things up quite a bit for the operator. The second piece of information here is specific to ColorCert QA tools. Those of you that use that, you will know that you have the ability to connect to 1 or more databases, and you can choose in the preferences which database you want to connect to, if you do in fact have more than one database. What this does for the operator is show them that we are indeed connected to a database and which one we're connected to. In my case, I have a database that I created called Single Angle, and that's the database that I'm connected to at the current moment. And then lastly, in this section, we have information about PantoneLIVE. And if we are connected, if we do have a PantoneLIVE license and we have this properly set up, this verifies that for us. It tells me that I am connected to PantoneLIVE. And it also shows me the email address of the account that I'm connected to. And this is very useful because without this, it can sometimes, you can connect to PantoneLIVE and it can be difficult to know which library under which user that's actually set up for. So this gives you that information. And paired with that, if you look to the right of where we're at right now, this is also PantoneLIVE information. This shows us when the license that I'm connected to expires. But what may be the best feature, that code that you see, the JUU6AB, that is actually my renewal code. And so when it comes time to renew my PantoneLIVE license, I'm going to need this renewal code. And prior to us including this in the status section, it was a little bit of a pain to get to it. You had to go to the X-Rite website. You had to log into my X-Rite. You had to go to the PantoneLIVE section and look at your licenses. So this just makes it much easier for you. You've got access to your renewal code right here in the software. Plus, if you're managing a pool of PantoneLIVE licenses, this makes it very easy to know which workstation is using which of your licenses. So we have that information readily available. We've also expanded the options that appear when I select my device button. So I'm just going to real quickly show you that as well. When I click on my device button, in this case, the exact, I have an option to configure the device. Now what this does, if I select this option, if I need to do something to set up my instrument, maybe I haven't set up my instrument yet, maybe I'm switching my instrument for some reason, the way that we do that is to go into the preferences, find the device settings, and then we can start to configure things. This is basically a shortcut to that. If I click on configure device, it takes me directly to the device settings and preferences. So it's a time saver for us. Plus, we don't have to remember the path of how to get there. The next thing we can do is calibrate the instrument. Clicking this button will, with the exact, it's very quick because, as you know, the exact is able to calibrate itself. So if I click this button, the device just begins its calibration routine. With the CI64, as you know, that device is not able to calibrate itself, as is the exact. And at least for myself, I find it easier to calibrate that device through the software than through the instrument display. This just takes me right to the calibrate section within the CI64, and I can immediately begin calibrating. There's an option to disconnect the instrument. So if for some reason I did want to disconnect, I can click this. Probably what's more important is if the device is not connected, this option right here will say connect instrument. And that's more likely the case. So maybe I launched ColorCert and shoot, my USB cable was not connected. I can plug in the USB cable, and in most cases, it'll probably connect immediately. But if it doesn't, I can come down here, click connect instrument, and the software will go out and pull for that instrument. And the last option here is device messages. And basically what this does is this will ask the instrument for all of the information it's able to provide for. So I made a screen grab of that just so you can see. This is an example. This is the information that my Exact is able to provide. So this gives us information like the serial number, the firmware that's loaded on the instrument. You can see, oops, didn't mean to do that. You can see the connection method here is indeed USB. All of this sort of information, it's able to pull from the instrument and display for us. In everyday operation, we probably don't need to do this, but in certain cases, we may want to. For example, if there was an error message in the device, we would see that. And in my case here, it's showing 00, which means there is no error. So this is something that if we get into troubleshooting, most likely you'll be on the phone with somebody at X-Rite, we can do that. And the last thing I want to show you, and then I'll open it up to questions, is here I've switched instruments. So I'm now connected to a CI64 rather than an Exact. And really two things here. First, as with the Exact, it's showing me my aperture size. This is probably more important if I have a CI64 with a switching aperture. If I have an Exact with a 2mm aperture, it's always going to be 2mm, and I probably just know that unless somebody switched instruments on me. With the CI64 that has a switching aperture, you guys may or may not be familiar with that. Exact is by far the most common instrument in a print environment. But for certain cases, like very reflective materials or texture materials, we will use a CI64, which is a spherical device. And we have a model that has a switchable aperture that can be set to either 4mm or 8mm. And in that case, it's important to know that. So that provides us that information right here. Also in the CI64 series, because it is a spherical instrument, we don't have M modes like we do with single angle devices, but we do have specular included and specular excluded. The CI64 actually does a reading in each mode when we take a reading. So in this case, it's telling me that we have both spin and specs activated. The other thing that we have here when we're connected to a CI64, when we're connected to an Exact, the status indicator is either going to be red or green, meaning we're connected or we're not connected. We still have that with the CI64, but we also have a third state, which is the orange color that you see here. Now, what that means, it means I've connected to my device, but the instrument is currently not calibrated. We put this in with the CI64. As you are probably aware, the Exact is able to self-calibrate. It's very simple. As long as we have the instrument turned on and open, it just calibrates itself. The CI64 is still a manual operation to calibrate, so it's much more likely to be in a state that's out of calibration. And as I mentioned before, it's easier to use the calibrate option under the CI64 button in the software than it is to use the instrument interface to calibrate. So it just is a convenience factor when you're using the CI64. It lets you know immediately that the device is not calibrated. And so with that, Robert, I will turn it back over to you for a moment for your poll, and then we can open it up to questions.
While we wait for questions to come in, I am going to pop up a poll. If anyone would like to talk to a sales representative or have someone contact them for a follow-up, feel free to answer this poll. While we wait for questions to come in, we'll see if any questions do come in. I'll leave this up for about 30 seconds or so. We'll see if anything comes in here. Is there a location where people can find additional educational resources or any more information on ColorCert or tutorials, Bob?
Yeah, there is. So one place that we have a lot of resources for ColorCert is we do have a YouTube channel, and if you were to go to YouTube, and then if you were to search for X-Rite support, you will find an X-Rite support channel there, and we have a host of videos there, not just for ColorCert, but for other X-Rite products as well. There is also, if you were to just go to the X-Rite website and search for ColorCert, we do have a written operator's manual for folks that maybe are more comfortable with that type of document. I think my personal belief is that the videos are easier, but we're all different. We have different learning styles. There is written documentation for this as well.
We will end here for today. So again, I'd like to say thanks everyone for attending today's webinar. Recording will be sent out tomorrow, and have a great rest of your day. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Bob.
Yep, thanks everyone.